Hey guys, welcome to Let's Unravel, and I'm your friend Christina. In this week's episode, we are talking all about hangout comedies. Do you think Mindy Kaling's new sitcom, Not Suitable for Work, has what it takes to rank well with Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and New Girl? All that and more in today's episode. But first, hot take, productivity is just socially acceptable anxiety. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll let you know my thoughts at the end of this episode. Anyways, thanks for stopping by. Whether you're a new listener or friend of the show, I just wanted to say welcome. So guys, are any of you watching Freddie's journey through the US? You know, Freddie, the German, the one who came to the US to see the World Cup, is doing like a whole road trip of like around the US before he ends up where, I don't know, what state did he decide? But the point is, Freddie is here in the US because he is going to attend the World Cup. And so he decided to do, along with his friends, is he's taking a massive road trip through the US. And it all started with him posting about it on X, aka Twitter in my mind. And he absolutely blew up. And the best part is he is making Americans fall in love with America again, which is so funny. It's such wholesome content. It really is. He is falling in love with country music via Ella Langley, and he got to go to one of her concerts. He is going to only the finest American cuisine that the US has to offer. Waffle House. And it's just so funny. So he has been taking the world along with him, posting all about the new states he's going through, his observations of different states. It's absolutely hysterical, but it's so sweet. It's so wholesome. He's absolutely loving his time in the US. And like I said, he's making Americans fall in love with the US all over again. This World Cup has actually been exactly what America needs. And then on top of it, I think it's Scottish people in Boston right now. They're putting construction cones on all of like the Boston statues. It's hysterical, but this World Cup is like healing some type of wound within all of us. And it's just bringing a level of connection who would have ever thought was possible. But you know what? That is why I think we do sports, you know? Anyways, you can find Freddie on TikTok, X, and I think those are the only places he's on. But I've been having a great time getting updated on all of his journeys. So without any further ado, let's get into our episode this week. So at the top of the episode, I talked about how we were going to talk about Hangout Sitcoms. Now, if you're anything like me, I never even knew Hangout Sitcoms was like, I'm sure this term has been around longer than me, but it's a new term for me. So when I ever found out like Friends and like How I Met Your Mother, these are like hangout sitcoms where the whole premise of the show is like really the dynamic of just these people's friendships. I thought this was such a great topic for today's episode. So this episode is super exciting to me for multiple reasons, and it's super exciting for you guys as well. So this week we are celebrating the launch of season 2 of Let's Unravel. This is officially our 1-year anniversary of doing Let's Unravel. I think this is absolutely crazy, so exciting. And, you know, if I'm being completely honest, I wouldn't be here without any of you. I appreciate all of the love and the support, the comments, the likes, all of it. You know what? I even appreciate the dislike buttons on some of those videos. Anyways, because those too boost the algorithm. But the point is, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you guys, all of the subscribers, the followers. Thank you guys so much. It's so exciting because I get to see where you guys are around the world that's listening to Let's Unravel. So just a big shout out to Spain. There's some reoccurring listeners there. Super exciting to be, you know, international. Have some listeners in the UK, have a bunch of listeners in the US, you know, shout out to Connecticut. Anyways, but the point is there's a bunch of different places around the world that you guys are listening to Let's Unravel. And it just is so exciting to see that weekly. It's so exciting to see your voices in comment sections, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you guys are writing reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So thank you guys so much. Now for the future of Let's Unravel, we have gone through so many different milestones in season 1. We hit our first episode, just making it out onto the scene. We hit episode 10, which most new podcasts don't reach past the 10th episode. And then we hit another major accomplishment last week with posting episode 50. And so that was super exciting there. Now I thought it was only fitting that we would talk about young adult comedies or hangout sitcoms, whichever like term you prefer. But basically in the first episode of Let's Unravel, I talked about Friends and I talked about How I Met Your Mother. And I ended up talking about how both of these sitcoms followed people in their mid to late 20s. And so within those shows, we got to see a lot of the humble beginnings that those characters went on, whether it was within Friends and how Rachel ended up just storming into the coffee shop, basically running out on her wedding from Barry. And then you have Ted Mosby, who's coming on the scene and he is desperately just trying to find his wife. And then you have Jess, who ends up moving into an apartment with 3 guys. You have all these unique dynamics that happen in your 20s. And so what is so exciting with Let's Unravel is this has kind of been like almost like an open diary to myself in a way. Hey, it's my good luck Charlie. Actually, it would be good luck Christina. But anyways, but the point is with Let's Unravel in this past season, I've had a lot of humble beginnings and a lot of, let's just put it this way. I've done a lot of learning on the fly, done a lot of in-time learning, should we say. And, the lighting has been harsh. The audio hasn't recorded at times. And there's been crying, just like any journey you go on, there is crying. So some of the exciting things that we're doing here at Let's Unravel for season 2 is we are doing a glow up. We are doing a revamp on the brand. So where this podcast had started, where it was a lot of personal stories, don't get me wrong, I will tell you guys personal stories, don't you worry. But really, one of the hearts behind Let's Unravel that I have started to notice in doing podcasting and everything is our pop culture reports were big successes within the show. And now doing some reflecting on my 20s, being at the tail end of my 20s, is I have realized there's always been one thing that has been this constant in my life, that when I'm trying to build connections or trying to create conversations with like coworkers or peers or family and friends and different things like that, there's always one particular topic that is able to always bridge the gap, and that is pop culture. So right now, moving forward with Let's Unravel, instead of doing a pop culture report just once a month, we are moving Let's Unravel into our mantra is going to be humanizing pop culture. And really what the heart behind Let's Unravel is going to be is it's going to be looking at real life events, pop culture events, and humanizing it, because stars, celebrities, they're just like me and you. There's these real life moments that are happening in pop culture around us that I think we can relate to more than we expect. And after all, there's nothing more validating than when you look at art, like music, movie, TV shows. I mean, you could even talk about paintings, but there's nothing more validating than when you get to see like the lived experiences that you've had, or maybe experiences that you're having in your 20s, but you're seeing it in like mainstream culture, pop culture, whatever you want to call it. For like a perfect example is I've been loving the song The Cure by Olivia Rodrigo. There's something so unique about the song, and the reason why it's so unique is this song summarizes that realization that you have when all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, a romantic relationship isn't gonna fix me. Like, I have to do the work, that no matter how hard my partner tries, he will never fix the voids or the pain that I have within. It's kind of just like they're there, and it's there for me to have to fix, discover, and go on a journey with. And it's the very same thing when we look at other Hangout sitcoms. Like I said, when we look at Friends and we look at Rachel, Rachel was a perfect example to me about where you start isn't where you end up. And you even look at shows like New Girl, and I loved how every character within New Girl, they had their own uniqueness. You can call it quirkiness. They were weird in their own way. But what was so unique about the show is no matter what your quirk is, your people will accept you. And that was such a pivotal moment within the show, is that you got to see all these different very unique characters, whether it was the dynamic between the girls of Cece and Jess, or whether it was between the dynamic of the boys and it was Winston and Nick and Schmidt. And the point always is no matter what uniqueness, quirk that you have, there are people out there that will love and accept you for who you are. And then you move on to How I Met Your Mother, and you think about the whole premise of that show and how really the journey to love is just as important as the discovery of love. And I think that was such a once again, I think it was such a special show to really kind of grow up with and get to experience with. And now we move into Mindy Kaling's new show, Not Suitable for Work. And one of the driving forces I feel like I'm starting to see throughout this show is a career is always your focus until you find a life. Your life can be your friends, it can be love, or it could be purpose. And so once again, this is why pop culture is so important to all of us, because it is a way to unify us. Once again, Freddie from Germany, he is unifying the Americans within the US. And we have these pop culture moments that are creating conversations all around us. So Let's Unravel, we are going to start humanizing pop culture. And so I do have a quick little surprise for you before we get into a whole breakdown of Not Suitable for Work, and just the comparing and contrasting between some of our beloved sitcoms of like Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and New Girl, which I know there's many other amazing Hangout sitcoms out there too. Those are just like the top 3, or at least the ones I'm seeing that are most referenced with Not Suitable for Work. But I do have a couple surprises for you really quick before we move into that. So like I said, Let's Unravel is getting a glow up. So that means our podcast cover is also getting a glow up, and I'm going to insert a photo right here. Do you see it? Does it look lovely? Beautiful? I really like it. Anyways, so yeah, drop some comments down below if you think that you like it too. Anyways, so if you happen to be listening on Apple or Spotify, so you're not necessarily watching on YouTube, you can also check out our podcast cover on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. It will be updated for you there as well. We are going to be giving our YouTube channel a nice little facelift with the new podcast cover and some more photos, like a YouTube banner and all those great things. You basically anywhere that you can connect with us, that's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all those places, those will all be updated as well. And after all, you can't celebrate an anniversary or a birthday or anything without a dessert, because I'm a foodie and that just feels sacrilegious. So I got it. It kind of looks like a cake. It's like a chocolate mousse cake or whatever. So this is our little celebration, or maybe let's call it a big celebration. So this is our big celebration of Let's Unravel and our 1-year anniversary, because this is a big accomplishment, even for you guys too. You guys have really been hanging in there with me. So I did get a candle and I do have a lighter. And so I'm going to see how well I can light this without lighting my house on fire. Did I do it? Ooh, I did it. Okay. Anyways, so can you guys see that? So happy birthday, happy 1-year anniversary. And like I said, thank you guys so much for listening. I wouldn't be here without you guys. So super exciting. You know what? I'd have you guys blow out the candle, but I am talking to a camera. It'd be a little odd. Anyways, all right. Well, I do have one last surprise for you guys, and it is a new podcast trailer. So I'm going to run it for you guys here now. Check it out. Hey guys, welcome to Let's Unravel, and I'm your host, Christina Esther, or honestly, I prefer to say I'm your friend Christina. Anyways, Let's Unravel is a podcast focused on humanizing pop culture for young adults. Throughout a majority of my 20s, one topic would continuously create conversations and connections, whether with new friends, coworkers, or family members, and that was always pop culture. Anything from the newest show or season of a Netflix series, a Marvel movie, or maybe a new album dropped that week. You are always one conversation away from connection. So let's hang out, whether over a cup of coffee, a commute to work, or a deep clean. We have new episodes every Thursday, and you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. We also have video episodes available on YouTube at Let's Unravel Pod, and you are not going to want to miss a thing. So I'll see you there. So how did you guys like the new podcast trailer? Pretty great. I might be a little biased. Anyways, but by the way, if you happen to be liking this episode or enjoying this channel, make sure you're pressing that like button and subscribe button. And if you happen to be listening anywhere else, such as Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you're pressing that follow button to stay up to date on all new episodes. We have new episodes every single Thursday, and you are not going to want to miss a thing. Anyways, so moving into Mindy Kaling's new sitcom, Not Suitable for Work. So what is so unique about all of these shows, these are like the young adult shows, so it can be anyone from the ages of like 18 to really 30. And so with Mindy Kaling's new show, Not Suitable for Work, you know what is something that I realized that I thought was really interesting? It seems like every single decade we get a new young adult show, because in 1994, that is when Friends aired. In 2005, that's when How I Met Your Mother aired. And then in 2011, we got New Girl. And now we have Not Suitable for Work, which is aired in 2026. With Mindy Kaling's new project here, I had some mixed feelings, because if I'm going to be honest, I have mixed feelings with the projects that she's put out. You know, I could never really get into the Mindy project itself. That wasn't really my speed. But then she had some other really great shows, which she's also written on so many or helped co-create so many different shows. But some of her most recognizable shows are like The Mindy Project, Never Have I Ever, The Sex Lives of College Girls, Running Point, and like we said, so many more shows. So my first review of the show, I went into it a little bit critical. I'm going to be honest. I was excited to watch it. I have seen some of Mindy's other projects. You know, the thing that is so unique and so different with Mindy's other projects, like when we look at Never Have I Ever, there was such a uniqueness to that show. Now, granted, that was about a girl being in high school, and something about like young high school like shows and different things like that. I think it's because so much can happen in high school. It really makes it like, it's just so dramatic, but was like a lot of comedy. But the other thing is, when you look at those projects, especially like Never Have I Ever, the actress that played Davy on that show, she was exceptional. Like, she was so good. And the reason why it was so good, this character created a visceral reaction out of people. You either loved her or you hated her. And that is exactly what you want out of someone that is leading your show. As an audience, you want to have a real visceral reaction to them, because what is so interesting is if you absolutely love these characters, you will 100% show up next week. And if you 100% hate this character, sometimes you will continue to show up. But what's also so great is when you hate a character so much and then all of a sudden they become super likable and they have this like redemption arc. That is great television, movies, series, everything. That is what you want. And you see that again in a lot of Mindy's other projects. But when I went in watching this new sitcom, whenever you go to start a new show, I do feel like there's some layer of you that's a little critical, because it's sort of like, I think it's the weirdest thing. It's like you're always running the risk of like, is this a waste of my time? Am I really going to like it? Is it really going to be that good? And it's funny because I remember the last time I felt that way about like a sitcom, and it was the very first time I watched New Girl. And I remember being so like critical about it, like the first episode or so, but there was something about New Girl that after watching like the first episode, and it was a really funny premise about how one girl moves into an apartment with three guys because it was like she had a messy breakup and she just needed to get out and away from her boyfriend. So it was a really like funny spin of like the millennial experience and awkward and random like roommate situations and different things like that. But it ended up being such a great sitcom. It ended up being such a great, hangout show. And so when I was looking at Not Suitable for Work, which I also think it's really funny that the acronym for it is NSFW, which is like an acronym basically that's put on content so that if you're at work, this is not suitable to watch at work. I don't know. It's just kind of like a fun and ingenious, like kind of pop culture reference, but also like, I don't know. I liked it. I thought that was pretty clever. And part of the reason why I was excited about this show is I did know one of the main characters from previous projects. So the cast member that I knew was Ella Hunt. Ella Hunt plays the character AJ. Now she is recognizable from other projects such as Dickerson, which was on Apple TV. And then she was in the movie Saturday Night, which is like an SNL like movie, like origin of their first taping of their episode. And she's been in a bunch of other projects as well. But like I said, I had seen her in a couple different things, and I remembered seeing a trailer for this new show, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. To me, Ella Hunt always seemed to be like kind of underrated, that like I feel like she's gonna have like a big breakout moment at some point in time. So I was really excited to see her in this show. So what was really exciting was to see some of the other cast members on this show. Now I'm gonna try really hard to say this next girl's name without mispronouncing it, but I'm sure I'm gonna mispronounce it. But it was Avantika Vandanapu, and she plays Abby. Now she was in some recognizable projects like the Mean Girls musical movie. I thought she was really good in that movie personally. She was also in Senior Year with Rebel Wilson. And so the rest of the cast is Will Angus plays Davis. He was in shows like Prom Dates, and that's on Hulu. He's relatively new. And then there's Nicholas Duvernay. He plays Kel. He was in movies such as Purple Hearts and Reminders of Him and some more projects. And then lastly, we have Jack Martin. He plays Josh, and he's a relatively newcomer as well. And he was in movies such as Pizza Movie. So they have a unique cast. A majority of this cast has some experience. And then you have like Will and Jack, who are relatively newcomers. But what is so interesting about the world that we live in right now is, so as I was doing some research for this show, I have gotten really into like Reddit. And so I was curious to see what Reddit was saying about Not Suitable for Work. And I'm going to read you some Reddit comments at the end of this episode. But I just have to say, there is nothing that Gen Z seems to get more upset with than when millennials are trying to write the Gen Z experience. And I just have to say, Gen Z is truly a one of one generation. Like, they're so different than every generation prior to them. But the one thing I feel like that truly separates Gen Z from like any other generation is most generations, like let's look at millennials, is these generations really longed to be validated. So like millennials always wanting to be validated because maybe they were raised by boomer parents. You have like Gen X. I mean, basically you have all of these generations that in some way or another, they do want to be validated. And you see that through like the art, you see that through the movies. Like so much about it was really wanting to be seen, wanting to be known. And what is so interesting is when I look at Gen Z, this is like the first generation that I feel like, because so much of our world is so accustomed to validating people now, where it's like, I see you, I hear you, and all these different things. I feel like what Gen Z actually really wants and what they crave instead of validation is they crave recognition. They want to be recognized. They want to be recognized for their individualism. And really, because they want to be recognized as individuals, because they want to be seen as, I mean, let's put it this way. I just feel like so many generations like crap all over Gen Z. And like, don't get me wrong, every generation has flaws. The thing with Gen Z that makes them so special is because they are the one of one generation. They're not looking for millennials to write their stories. They really want someone from within their own world, writing their own stories. And what's so interesting is most of these Hangout sitcoms that we talk about, like when we're talking about Friends, when we're talking about How I Met Your Mother, and even when we talk about New Girl, so many of the writers in these rooms, like with Friends, granted the writers in the room of Friends were like, I think in their early 30s, but the point is Friends was based on their lived experience. So that is why they were sitting down and they were writing the show. And even though they might have been like 5 years older than where the pilot characters started at like 25, but the point is it was a relatively close experience to what they had. And on top of it, technology wasn't changing that drastically. Then you get into shows like New Girls, and like, again, these writers, they lived these experiences. So it was easy to fold it into present day because all of these lived experiences were so close. Now, when we get to Not Suitable for Work, some of the big overarching things, especially that I'm seeing on Reddit, is a lot of like people are really frustrated. They're like, it's kind of boring, it's kind of overdone. And the other thing is, once again, because of streaming, Not Suitable for Work isn't just competing against other shows that are currently on right now. It is competing against Friends. It is competing against How I Met Your Mother. It is competing against New Girl. And when we look at this cast and we look at these characters, the nice thing is this: it's not like every character is a copy paste version of each character from one of these Hangout sitcoms. I will say they're a little bit of a mix of them to some degree. Like there is a resemblance there. And so because Not Suitable for Work has to compete against the streaming shows, the streaming success of those previous shows, it has a lot it has to live up to. I would say my biggest critique of the entire show is I feel like it just really bops around too much. And the thing is, it's not that Mindy Kaling doesn't know how to write a successful show. That's not it. I think part of the reason why the messaging seems a little scattered is because when you look at the writer's room, Mindy Kaling, a lot of these writers now are in their mid 40s or so. But the thing that's so hard is they're trying to bring so much relevance of like current trends like TikTok, and I don't know, like it's kind of like they're trying to be so hipster, or not even hipster. They're trying to be cool. And the thing is, there's nothing funnier than Gen Z than when Gen Z is like, millennials are not cool. That's just, and listen, I am technically a millennial. So does it hurt my feelings? You know what? It is what it is. But anyways, I don't think I ever thought of myself as being cool, so I don't know if it really hurts my feelings. But anyways, but the point is when we look at her new sitcom, it is all over the place because it's being positioned as like a workplace sitcom. It's kind of falling into a lot of these weird archetypes for sitcoms. Like there's the workplace dramaness of it. There's the ensemble cast of it. There's the romantic comedy aspect, the quarter life crisis. And I would say the hardest thing for this show to do and to compete with some of the classics out there is like when you look at Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and New Girl, they really focused on the friend group aspect. You spent more time with the group of friends than you spent with the individual characters like on their own or on their own side quests. Especially in the beginning, like that first season of Friends. And on top of it, like some of the success, like when you look at the success of Mindy's other projects, Never Have I Ever, The Sex Lives of College Girls, both of those shows dropped full seasons from the get-go. Whereas when we look at Not Suitable for Work, they are going like 2 episodes released weekly. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think releasing weekly episodes is actually a really great like strategy moving forward. It's creating like anticipation. But I also think if you're going to have the type of show where it's like you really need to build some type of like connection, it's almost like you need to build a real connection with the show so that you want to keep watching it. And that is where I feel like you're slowly starting to lose some of the audience, is in that weekly drop. Whereas if you dropped all the episodes, you built that connection. So maybe, I don't know, put it this way, people will hate binge watch too, even if they don't like something. It has to be truly awful for people to be like, yeah, I'm turning this off. But when it's like a weekly show, you just forget about it. But I would say part of this show is really missing a strong voice within it. Because obviously we've been doing this whole comparing and contrasting of Friends, How I Met Your Mother, and New Girl, and every show had this strong vocal point that they were about. How I Met Your Mother, you always knew what the show was going to be about. It was always going to be about trying to figure out who the mother is. You look at shows like Friends, it's about friends. You look at New Girl, it's all about Jess and about how she's the new girl in the apartment. So that is the dynamic. When we look at Not Suitable for Work, it's clearly about careers. It's about like that driving force, about being in New York, being in Manhattan for the first time. But now, I guess my biggest thing that I start to think about with this show is I wonder, this obsession with career, was that a big personality trait of truly millennials because of the girl bossing and the hustle and the grinding? And I just wonder, is a show like this that is so career focused, is that the heartbeat for Gen Z? And so that is where, I don't know, honestly, put it this way, a show like this can't compete with Friends, New Girl, and How I Met Your Mother. It has a charm to it. I do feel like it's kind of missing something. I really like the dynamic of the girls. I really like AJ and Abby. I think the way even now, I mean, gosh, I think they're only up to like episode 8 or so. They're somewhere between like 7 and 10 episodes at this point in time. But like Abby, I feel like she's already had a really good kind of like change, like character-wise. She's not what I quite would have expected. I'm sorry, I can't stand Davis personally, and I really like Josh, and I think my favorite is Kel. But all in all, the show, I do feel like it's missing a little bit of like a particular voice, and I don't feel like it's really the voice of Gen Z. I think it'd be really interesting if you had a Gen Z voice in the writer's room, because I think it would change and pivot the whole dynamic of the show to a degree too. Now, I am going to read you some Reddit reviews, because Reddit has been cracking me up recently. Absolutely hysterical. So I'm only going to read you a couple comments from one particular thread that was cracking me up. So this thread is called "Not Suitable is Really Bad, Unfortunately." And so the person writes, "Our Wangus is really great in it." Wangus is for Will Angus. And he says, "I cannot stand the rest of it. The comedy is way too millennial and the background music seemingly never ends. The dialogue is overall terrible. It's classic Mindy Kaling garbage. It's also shot and colored like a pharmaceutical commercial." That is really funny. Okay, and so some more comments under it goes, "It's good, very Mindy Kaling, and not for everyone, but generally good enough with story and acting to get past that." And then someone else commented on that comment and said, "Very Mindy Kaling, the new euphemism for not that enjoyable." That is really funny. This next person comments, "Honestly, I went in with the expectation that it was going to be really bad, but it was actually okay. Good for a couple of laughs. Wangus and Jack Martin are by far the best performances." And then OP, which is the original poster, commented and said, "They're both good in it. I don't know, maybe it's me, but all the dialogue is just Tinder ghosted, slay, problematic, awkward." And then someone else commented and said, "The dialogue is so bad that I actually think all of the leads do a pretty good job just making their delivery sound somewhat natural. The good thing is that Wangus is the comedic standout, so I think this will lead to better work for him in the future." So like I said, if you want to know some unfiltered opinions about Not Suitable for Work, go check out Reddit. It's absolutely hysterical. Okay, my final thoughts on Not Suitable for Work is I actually agree a lot with some of these Reddit threads. I really liked the last comment where they said, "The cast is actually pretty good." I do agree. I think the cast is really good. And like, personally, I really do think Ella Hunt is doing a great job as AJ, because once again, any of these characters, if they can create or elicit this strong reaction out of you, like Davis, I can't stand him. But what is so funny is when he has these moments of where it's like he's really a sweetheart, it hits so much better. And it's the same thing with Kel. I kind of wasn't sure how I was going to feel about Kel. And now more into the show, I'm like, oh my God, I love him. He's so, and it's the same thing. Like all of these guys have these really sweet, lovable like aspects of them. I think the thing that's just so interesting is I like how you have one character, AJ, who's like an analyst. She's in the finance world. And then you have another one who is like in the fashion world. So it is really interesting to see the dynamic of these characters. But that is my final thoughts on the show and just kind of comparing and contrasting. But let me know what your thoughts are on Not Suitable for Work. Who's your favorite character? Do you like the show? Are you going to stop watching the show? Do you like Mindy Kaling projects? Let me know. And if you want to get connected with the Let's Unravel community, make sure you're heading over to Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Let's Unravel Pod. And you can catch us on Thursdays with new episodes. Well, I guess it's that time of the episode to tell you my hot take. Do I think productivity is just socially acceptable anxiety? Okay, you know what? I think I've said this in previous episodes. I'm going to state it again. So I had asked ChatGPT some hot takes, and this was one of them. And when you think about it, I feel like when you really think about it, productivity is just socially acceptable anxiety. Yeah, I can kind of see it. Like the attention to detail. Okay, hear me out. You make a checklist, you get excited, you cross it off, and you're like, I've been so productive. I mean, yeah, it's got to be socially acceptable anxiety, right? Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Anyways, that's all. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.